In this video, we're going to take a look at one of Ableton Live's physical modeling synths, Collision. With physical modeling synthesis, the goal is to emulate the physics and sounds of real-world materials. So Collision is called Collision because it's designed to emulate the sound of a mallet hitting a material. Collision looks pretty complicated, but like all of the other Ableton instruments, if you understand the layout, it becomes much easier to manage. Let's break it down. First off, let's notice that there are several tabs across the top here. The first tab is called the Excitator, and this is the tab we're looking at. Notice that there's also an LFO tab, and there are two LFOs included with Collision, and you can route them to a variety of destinations. We're not really going to look at the LFOs in this video because by now you are probably aware of what LFOs do, and you can explore that section on your own. Also, there is a Midi Modulation tab here, and you can see that you can choose destinations for your pitch bend and mod wheels if you have a MIDI controller, and you can also choose what to do with Aftertouch, and we will cover Aftertouch in another video. But you have two destinations for the mod wheel and Aftertouch, and amount controls. So again, we're not going to cover this in any more detail in this video, but you can look at that on your own. Instead, we're going to focus back on this Excitator tab. Now, Collision has two oscillators, Mallet and Noise. Let's look at Mallet first. If I play a note with just the mallet on, you can hear the sound of a mallet striking a material. In this case, we have to look at the Resonator tab to see that it is a beam. We'll come back to this tab in a few minutes. Underneath Mallet, you have a volume control. You also have a noise control. Now, this is not the same noise as in the Noise tab. This is the noise of the mallet striking the material. And you can get some interesting results if you play around with this parameter. You can also adjust the stiffness of the mallet and the color of the noise. And anytime you see a color control, that's usually controlling the frequency balance of whatever it's adjusting. So right away, we have several controls that affect the sound quite dramatically. Furthermore, we have these K and V boxes everywhere. And what these do is they modulate whatever control they're near with the key position or the velocity of your note. So if I turn up my key tracking for volume, then when I play a lower note, it will be softer than if I play a higher note. I can take it all the way up to 200%, and the difference will be even more noticeable. And that's regardless of how hard I hit the key. If I want my key velocity, or how hard I hit the key, to affect the volume, then I need to turn the velocity tracking box up. Now, if I hit a note harder, it will play louder versus softer if I hit softer. You can also have inverse ratios here in case you would like to do that. I find that to be disorienting when I'm hitting a key harder and it's getting softer. You have key and velocity tracking modulation for stiffness and for the loudness of the noise here. Now let's talk about the next tab. This is the Noise Oscillator. It's a second oscillator. It can work in conjunction with Mallet, or it can work by itself. And if I turn this up and press a key, it also sends signal into the Resonator tab. The Noise Oscillator has a filter built into it, and you can use that to sculpt the sound. The filter can be set to low pass, high pass, band pass, or low pass plus high pass. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, wouldn't that just be a band pass? Sort of, but they are slightly different algorithms. This is the sound of the band pass, and this is the sound of the low pass plus high pass in the same position. slightly different. There is an envelope here for the noise oscillator. This is an amplitude envelope, and it gives dramatic results if you adjust it. Also, there is a box here under the filter that has E next to it. And if I crank this up, then this amplitude envelope will also affect the filter frequency. And so that's kind of a handy thing to have. Now, both of these oscillators, the Mallet and Noise, go into the Resonator section here. The Resonator has tuning controls, so you can transpose it or fine-tune it. Notice that the key tracking here is set to 100%. That's by default, and that makes sense because you would want the note to follow the keys on your keyboard. If you were to turn that up to 200%, it would expand your keyboard. So if I go up by one note, it goes up 2 notes. And if I set it to 50, for instance, it would only go up a half step instead of a full step. There's a pitch envelope, and by now you know what pitch envelopes do. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but here's an example of it. And you can adjust the time of that envelope. This is the main game here for the resonator section. Number one, you can choose the material that is hit by the mallet or is excited by the noise. And so it's been on beam this whole time. Let's try a different one. How about string? Totally different sound. In this black box, you can see a material control and a decay control. Further to the right will increase your decay time. And further up increases the sort of the resistance of the material. So as you can hear, a wide variety of sounds are possible. Again, there's key and velocity tracking for many of these parameters. There are tonal controls here for brightness and inharmonics, which add sort of odd numbered or not even whole numbered overtones to your signal. And this is a very interesting section, the listening section. You can use these 3 knobs to control where the initial hit of collision sounds like it's coming from, either the left, the right, or somewhere in the center. And you can adjust the left and right independently. And then this hit control here basically is a strength control for these. If it's set to 100%, then these will be 100% in effect. And if it's something less, then less so. You can also randomize that with this random box here. And now when I hit notes, the hits for those notes sound like they're coming from different spots. There's a quality control here. So if you choose basic, it's easier on your computer's processor, but has fewer overtones in the sound. Or you can choose full, and there are many overtones, and it actually gives it a lot brighter of a sound. Notice that some of these controls are only active with certain surfaces here. And so, for instance, membrane has a ratio control, and this controls the ratio of the membrane, the ratio of its height to its width. It's kind of a hard thing to envision, but there it is. There is a volume control for Resonator 1, a bleed. Now, bleed is interesting. Basically, the mallet and the noise go through the resonator, but they also have their own dry sound that you can't normally hear unless you crank this bleed up. Now we'll get some of the dry mallet sound before it goes into the resonator blended with the resonator. Let me go back to something a little more melodic here. It's subtle, but maybe you can hear it. There is a pan control, and that pan control also has key tracking modulation built into it. Finally, all of these parameters in Resonator 1 can be copied to Resonator 2, and that can be turned on for an entirely different resonator. Or if you have settings in Resonator 2 that you like, you can copy them to 1. If you want to adjust a parameter on both resonators at the same time, for instance, pitch envelope, you can go to this link icon, and now this will adjust it for both of them. Finally, in the global section here, we have the global volume control for the plugin. We have a voices control, and remember that tells you how many notes you can play at one time. We'll stick with the default 4 for right now. And we have this interesting structure parameter. Now, right now, 1 going into 2 means that the Mallet and Noise oscillators go into Resonator 1, and then Resonator 1 goes through Resonator 2, if it's turned on. If I choose this structure instead, then Mallet and Noise go to both Resonator 1 and Resonator 2 equally, and then these are independently output and then summed at the global stage here. So in the next video, we're going to be looking at how we can manipulate these parameters to make a wide variety of interesting sounds.